It was so interesting for me to listen to Bernard's presentation for a couple of aspects. One is the complete parallels between what we do in the hotel industry and what the tourism industry is doing as well. And secondly, it reinforces the need for the public-private partnership that we work on. Because we do so many things, the government's doing so many things, and there's certainly a nexus there to work together. So I'm very pleased to see what you're doing, Bernard, and your good work. So thanks very much. On July 16th of last year, I was traveling through Asia. My plan was to stop off in Hong Kong for a couple of days, fly into Jakarta, spend a night there, and then fly on to Singapore the next night and spend the weekend in Singapore and continue doing some work there. I was traveling with, the plan was to meet my regional director in Jakarta, and then we would visit those hotels and go on from there. So I flew into Jakarta on the night of the 16th, and I remember we had a nice dinner at I was staying at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, which is one of our products, directly across the street from the JW Marriott Hotel. We had a nice dinner with the general manager, and we talked about the fact that there had not been any attacks in Indonesia for about 4 years. Before, there had been the Bali 1 bombings, there had been an attack against our hotel, there had been the attack against the Australian Embassy, there had been the Bali 2 bombings. It was almost a bombing season every fall in Indonesia. But there had not been anything for the last 4 years, and we were starting to feel pretty comfortable that Jemaah Islamiyah, the terrorist group that's organized and operating in Southeast Asia, had been fractured. The next morning I woke up fairly early. I went down to the gym about 5 o'clock and got a workout in, came up to my room, checked some emails, and then I took a shower, and I was standing there in the bathroom and I heard an explosion. And I thought, you know, what could that be? And the first thing you start thinking about is, you know, it must be an accident somewhere in the city. You just don't think of it as being an act of terrorism. And my phone rang, my regional director called me, Chris Yin, and he said, you know, asked me if I heard it. I assured him I had. And I looked out my windows, and my windows looked directly down on the front of the JW Marriott Hotel. And I could see a plume of smoke coming out the back, and I could see people running around the front. So I told Chris to go over to the JW Marriott, and I would join him over there. A couple of minutes later, there was a second explosion. And at that time, and that explosion actually happened at the Ritz-Carlton, where we both were. So Chris went across the street to the JW Marriott, and I got on the lift. And I remember getting on the lift, and we started going down, and it would stop at floors, and people would get on, and you know, they would act like they do on any day. They stare at the door, don't talk to each other. On about the 7th floor, a woman got on, and she said, "Did you hear that? It sounded like an explosion." And as the doors opened on the lobby level, I looked over to my left and saw the destruction there. And I moved into the restaurant called the Erlanger Restaurant, and that's where I saw that's where the bombing had taken place, and I saw the carnage there. And I stayed there for a few moments to get things stabilized there, and then I went across the street to the JW Marriott, and I went into the lobby lounge where the bomb had exploded there, and basically what I was looking at is upturned furniture, the ceiling had come down, water was coming down from the sprinklers, there was an inch of water on the floor, and I was looking at basically torsos. Because when an explosion happens, it rips limbs off people, and that's what I was looking at. It rips clothes off, and that's what we were dealing with for those first few moments. My phone started ringing. People started calling me to inform me there had been an explosion at the hotel, and I was getting calls from the United States. You know, people were telling me that they just heard about an explosion in Jakarta, and I assured them that I knew about it and we were dealing with it. So this really drove it home for me. I stayed there for about another 10 days. Chris stayed on for about 3 weeks. And so what I want to do is talk to you about this whole issue that we're dealing with, is mitigating this threat of terrorism around the world. Certainly this wasn't the first bombing that's happened at a hotel. When we look around the world and understand what's happened, there have been several attacks against hotels in the world. We can see that the Sheraton Hotel in Karachi, where there was an attack. We can look at what happened at our hotel in Jakarta in 2003. This attack that happened last year was actually the second attack against this hotel, and I'll talk about the other attack. We can look to see what happened at the Taj Hilton in 2004 when they drove a vehicle right into the lobby of the hotel. We can look to see what happened at the Serena Hotel attack, where armed attackers went into the hotel in 2008. We can certainly look to see what happened in Amman, Jordan. I just came from Amman yesterday, actually, and that's, again, we were looking at security in Amman, and we had the Hyatt, the Days Inn, and the Radisson hotels all hit in one day. And we can look certainly what happened in Mumbai, what happened in Islamabad, and it's a little bit frightening to see the number of attacks against hotels. Since 2001, there have been more attacks against the hotel industry than any other industry. And when we look at this chart that was published last September by Stratfor, it's a little bit frightening to me to look at this. And I did a presentation a few months ago, and it was entitled, "What Keeps You Up at Night?" And I started the presentation with this slide because this is what keeps me up at night, understanding what the threat is to the hotel industry. So why is this happening? Why are hotels being targeted? You know, certainly when we look at hotels, in many cities, they become iconic targets. When you look at what happened at the Taj Hotel, the Taj Hotel was an icon not only in Mumbai, but in India. When we look at what happened in Islamabad, the Marriott Hotel there, that hotel was an icon in Islamabad. Everybody visited that hotel. It was well known. And we get the same type of people staying in our hotels that would normally be affiliated with an embassy. Remember, before it was always the embassies that were hit. And then about 1993, the embassies really started hardening up. And so the targets shifted, and they shifted to softer targets, which are, unfortunately right now, hotels, transportation industry, other types of industry. So we've certainly got a disproportionate share of attacks against hotels. Well, let me talk to you, I'm going to talk to you about 3 attacks, and all 3 attacks were very, very different. One was a vehicle-borne IED, improvised explosive device, that hit our hotel in Islamabad. I'll talk about an armed attacker situation that happened in Mumbai, and then I'll talk about the situation that happened in Jakarta, where they came in a personal-borne IED. So all very, very different tactics, which is very important for us to understand because tactics continually evolve. This is dynamic, and we have to keep up with the tactics and try to get ahead of it. This is the type of security we had in this hotel. There was a very well-known terrorism expert in Singapore by the name of Dr. Rohan Gunaratne, and he wrote a paper after this calling this hotel the world's most protected hotel. And let me show you what type of security we had at this hotel before the attack. We had 196 security officers. This is a 290-room hotel. And for those of you in the hotel business who understand this, This would be normally your entire staff for a hotel. But we had 196 security officers, 60 of them were working at the time of the attack. Window film on all public areas. 62 CCTV cameras. They're monitored 24 hours a day. There's a supervisor and 2 officers in the room at all times. 4 bomb-sniffing dogs. A combination of a drop-down barrier and also these delta barriers, these hydraulic barriers that come out of the ground. Under-vehicle cameras, so they didn't just take the mirror and run it around the bottom of the car. They actually had cameras installed into the ground that would scan the bottom of the cars that came through, and then they could monitor that in a booth. Have you ever seen this type of security at a hotel, by the way? You know, it's just not something you would normally see. Well, let me tell you what happened the night of the attack. It happened about 8 o'clock at night. It was dark. There was a truck that came down the road. And he came down the roadway, and then all of a sudden he turned off the road and made a sharp left turn into the hotel's driveway. He shifted down into first gear, and then he accelerated. He thought he could get through the barriers and into the hotel itself. But when he hit that delta barrier, it just hung him up. And there he was sitting in the cab of the truck. And at that time, he detonated a small device in the cab, which killed him and started to fire in the cab. The security officers at the time thought that was the event. They called the fire brigade, they called the special branch, and they were standing by waiting for them to appear. There were some guests that started coming out of the hotel to see what was going on. And the security officers moved away and started pushing the guests back into the hotel. Go back in. It's not safe out here. Push them back into the hotel. 7 minutes later, the main charge detonated. This was a huge charge that went right into the hotel. 56 people died. But there were about 1,500 people in the hotel at the time because it was Ramadan and they were celebrating Iftar, which is the breaking of the fast. So you can imagine what would have happened if we didn't have that security up. If that truck was able to go through the barriers into the lobby of that hotel, we would have been counting the deaths, we would have been counting the deaths in the hundreds instead of the 56 who died. So that was the type of security we had up. But again, you could see what it did. The crater was 60 feet across and 25 feet deep. This was a huge bomb. So when we went over there, I got on the plane immediately and flew over to Islamabad. And when we got there, we met with the Intelligence Bureau. And the director of the Intelligence Bureau told me that we had 130 feet of setback. Now, setback is the distance between where we inspect the vehicle and the building itself. What contains that vehicle before it can get to the building? That's setback or standoff distance. And in my business, that's my best friend. We want to get as much standoff distance as we can. But when I listened to the head of the Intelligence Bureau tell me that we had 130 feet, I thought to myself, that doesn't sound right. I don't think there was that much. So I got a hold of my regional director and I said, let's go to a hardware store, we're going to buy a tape measure. So we did. We drove over to a hardware store and we bought a tape measure and we went back to the scene and we measured from the center of the crater to the building was 132 feet. Now the importance of that is that the U.S. government standard for setback of a U.S. government building overseas is 100 feet. And we had 132 feet. So we had adequate standoff distance. The problem is the device was just too large for us to contain. Well, I was back in Islamabad again a few months ago, and this is what the hotel looks like now. This is what the security is like. We've got, as you can see, we've got a perimeter wall now that goes around the hotel. On top of that wall is concertina wire. The wall goes 12 feet into the ground. It's a blast-resistant wall. In front of that wall, we have what are called HESCO barriers. Do any of you know what HESCO barriers are? Basically, they're these Kevlar-filled bags. They're about 1 meter cube, and they're filled with sand. And we have them 3 deep and 3 high in front of the wall. We have 8 gun emplacements. Security officers armed up with AK-47s. We have 2 snipers on the roof. You know, again, we have sniffer dogs. We have all this going on. This door you see, is a laser? This door you see here with the Delta barrier in front, the only time it opens is if the president of the country is coming to the hotel. Otherwise, that door is always closed. And then we've built what we call a hospitality room. See, that's the business we're in, right? The hospitality business. So once you go through this door here, you go into the hospitality room. And that's where all your luggage is screened through X-ray. You go through a walk-through metal detector. When that back door is closed, the front door opens. When the front door is closed, the back door opens. We never have the 2 doors open at the same time. In our business, we call it a man trap. So that if somebody wants to attack the hotel, they can't get through. They're always contained until they're inspected. So that's the type of security that we've got going on at that hotel now. You know, somebody said once, you can't make a hotel a fortress. This is a fortress. But in that environment, that's what we have to have. And, you know, it's interesting because I get asked the question a lot of times, what about the guests who come there? Do you get pushback from the guests? Actually, this is what the guests want to see. They welcome this type of security. Is this security appropriate around the world? Are we going to do this at every one of our hotels around the world? It doesn't make sense. Security has to be commensurate with the threat. You know, when we talk about hotels in downtown London, for instance, first of all, most of those hotels won't have the standoff distance that we look for. But again, we don't have the threat here in London that we have in Pakistan. And my own thinking is that Pakistan right now is the most dangerous country in the world. And having been there several times, I think I understand the security in Pakistan pretty well. At least in Afghanistan and Iraq, you know, we have armed forces that can contain a lot of these terrorist attacks. But in Pakistan, it's like the Wild West. You know, and we look in that area, which is called FATA, the federally administered tribal area, and I'm sure you've watched the news between North Waziristan, South Waziristan. That's the problem. And until they can contain that, we'll continue to have this problem. And then we go to the Taj Hotel. The Taj Hotel was built 105 years ago. It was built by the Tata family. Have any of you heard of the Tatas? They're a very, very wealthy family in India, and they have been for generations. And what was going on at the time is as you know, was part of the British Empire. And the British were building these beautiful hotels, but they wouldn't let the Indians stay in their hotels. So the Tata family decided to build their own hotel. And it would be luxury over the top, so that they could stay in these hotels and open them to Indians. And that's what they did 105 years ago. And as I said before, this hotel was really an icon, not only in Mumbai, but in India. The attack started at the Leopold Cafe. And when we went over there, and we went there a couple of weeks after the attacks, because if there's an attack against a hotel anywhere in the world, we always do a study of it and analyze it to see what had happened. When we went over there, we went to the Leopold Cafe. And it's a very, very popular cafe. Even a couple of weeks after the attack, it was difficult to get in. There were people standing out on the sidewalk waiting for a table. And that's what was going on that night. And when the attack started, as I said, they went to the Leopold Cafe. 2 of them went in there and sat in the cafe. And then they pulled out their weapons and opened fire. When the people heard the attack taking place, they started running down the street. And as you run down the street, at the bottom of the street is the Taj Mahal Hotel. And that's what they did. They ran down the street and went into the Taj Mahal Hotel. Two of the attackers went into the Taj at the same time. They were carrying AK-47s in their backpacks. And they went into the Taj Hotel, stood in front of the reception desk for a couple of minutes conversing, and then one went off to the left and one went off to the right. The one who went off to the left went through there's a Louis Vuitton store and Hermes and some high-end stores there. The one who went off to the right went past the cafe where he opened fire, went past the swimming pool where he opened fire, and then they met at the bottom of the grand staircase. Two others came in through the back door. These were the two attackers that came from the Leopold. They came in through the back door, broke the door down, came into the hotel, and then the four of them started moving up the grand staircase. And as they did, they were firing their AK-47s and they were throwing grenades at the same time. And we could see the bullet holes in the doors and in the walls where they were shooting. They went up to the 5th floor, and when they got there, they set off an IED. And the purpose of that, the people at the Taj thought, was to take down the large dome, but it wasn't big enough to do that. And then they moved up to the 6th floor, and they went up to room 632, and that's where they laid siege for the next 60 hours. About 10 minutes after the attack started, two police officers showed up. They went up to the security office on the 2nd floor, and they could see through the CCTV what was going on and where these attackers were. But they were armed up with 9mm handguns, and they refused to engage. They weren't going to go up there because they felt they didn't have enough firepower, so they were going to wait for their forces to come. Well, the problem is those forces were coming from Delhi, and you've got a city of 18 million people in Mumbai, and they didn't have any dedicated tactical response unit. So they had to fly these guys in from Delhi, and they didn't have dedicated aircraft. So what they had to do was wait for the first commercial flight out the next morning, which was about 6 o'clock in the morning, fly down to Mumbai, and then they didn't have any rotary wing aircraft to take them in. So they had to wait and move their way through the traffic in Mumbai at rush hour traffic in the morning. And those were some of the failures in India which led to the number of people that were killed during those attacks. And you can see the smoke coming out of the 6th floor where they were. They were burning mattresses and trying to start the hotel on fire. Last January, a year ago January, I testified before the U.S. Senate Committee on Homeland Security. This was Senator Lieberman's committee, and they asked me, what were the learnings from this? And I said there were some learnings here. First of all, I said security should be analyzed by professionals, because what you've got is you've got hotel people, hotel management, making decisions for security, and they are not security experts. You know, I often tell people, don't ask me to be a general manager of a hotel. I would probably be a terrible general manager. You know, I'd give rooms away to all my friends. We wouldn't make any profit. But on the other hand, don't ask a general manager to be a security professional and understand intelligence and what's credible and what's actionable, because that's not what they do. And a lot of times, we do that. A lot of times in these smaller hotel companies, and that's what was going on with the Taj, is the intelligence people came over and told them that they had received threat information. So the Taj people put their security up. 2 weeks before the attacks, the Indian authorities came back and said, don't worry now, we've arrested those responsible, there's no threat anymore. So the Taj people took it down. Well, we put our hotels up about a year before that at threat condition red, which is our highest level, because we were watching what was going on in India with the other attacks, and we felt there was a threat in India, and we never took it down. We always kept it at threat condition red, and that's what was going on when these attacks occurred. Develop a surveillance detection team. You know, when I talked to the Taj people, they told me that these guys were working around the hotel for about 6 months conducting surveillance, and nobody picked up on that. None of the employees picked up on it. None of the security people picked up on it. Nobody picked up on the fact that all this surveillance was going on at the time. And so this is one of the learnings here, is develop a surveillance detection team. It's cheap, it's unobtrusive to guess, and it's effective. Because if you understand the attack cycle, every time there's an attack, they conduct surveillance. Every time there's an attack, they conduct surveillance. And if you can pick up the surveillance, you can disrupt the attack. And that's what we work on. Plans should be kept current and shared with authorities. Remember, this hotel was 105 years old, and they had done a lot of renovation in that 100 years. They still had the old building plans, and they were trying to share that with the authorities. It doesn't work. So the learning here, and what we've done, is we've taken our international hotels now, and we've got copies of their building plans. We've got copies of their executive rosters. We've got photos of the hotel, and we've all put it onto a secure server. So if there's an attack against a hotel now, we can reach into that server, pull that information, and give it to the authorities. Current building plans, phone numbers for the general manager, phone numbers for the owner, cell phone, all the ways to contact them, and photos so that they can visualize what the hotel looks like as they go into it. Install exterior CCTV. Again, when people are conducting surveillance, they're looking for security. And we want to put a lot of security outside the hotel so that they understand that we do have a security posture. I spent about a year on a project with RAND. RAND is a company based in Santa Monica, California, and they do a lot of terrorism research. And there were some people, Carl Barclay, if any of you know that name. Carl was on that project with me, John Smith from Prudential. We had some of the meetings were here in London, some of the meetings were in the United States. And we studied surveillance tactics conducted by Al-Qaeda. That was the whole purpose of the study. And then try to determine how we could break up this surveillance. Elevators can controlled by specific floor keys. So people don't have the run of the hotel when they go into the hotel to attack it. Develop an active shooter program. And the last thing is promote security awareness among the employees. As I said, this was going on, nobody was picking up on it. So we put together something called See Something, Say Something. And that's a program that we rolled out about a year ago now. We put together some posters, a series of 3 posters. And one is for the front of the house, one's for the back of the house, and one's pretty specific for housekeeping. As we designed this, and actually Peter did a lot of work on this, a lot of the photos came out of hotels here in the UK. But as we designed this, we said we needed to have a lot of pictures, very few words. Because a lot of the people who work in the back of the house, English is not their first language. We have many, many different nationalities, different cultures working back there. So it had to have a lot of pictures, very few words. And so we've rolled this out to our hotels, and a lot of them have translated that too into their own languages. I just came from Kuwait and Jordan, and I went into the back of the house and looked at their posters. And they have, in those hotels, they've probably made up a set of 10 or 12 for each hotel that they've posted in the back of the house. And we walked through and I looked at their posters, and they've translated that into Arabic so that people can read the posters. But this is one way that people can pick up on this. And we've done training with our security directors, and I tell them, you know, what we've got here is we've got dots. And we've got, you know, we have a housekeeper that sees a D&D sign on a room for 3 or 4 days, and she reports it. And on the other hand, we've got somebody who shows up at the front desk, and he's asking kind of some strange questions about security. and it's reported. And then we see this person in the hotel, and he's taking photos. And he's taking photos of CCTV cameras, which is pretty strange, and it's reported. So I tell the security director, you're the dot connector. Those are the dots, you're the connector. So that gets reported into the security director, and then all of a sudden, if one of those things in and of itself might not mean much at all, but when we start putting it together, we see that we've got a problem. And so that's the whole campaign here between the see something, say something. And I offered these posters up to my colleagues in the hotel industry. I was in Washington, D.C. DHS has taken it in Washington, D.C. and put it in their hotels. I sent it up to Vancouver before the Olympics, and the Vancouver PD was putting it in hotels in Vancouver. We're here to share because we don't think there should be, when we talk about security in hotels, we think we should work together. And David is here, Peter's here. What we've done is we've formed a council now called the Hotel Security Working Group. And it's comprised of the top security executives of all the major hotel companies. And we meet on a regular basis, and we talk about what the threat is out there. We look at best practices. And I'll give you a great example of how this works. I guess about 3 days ago, I got some information through classified channels that there was a current threat in India. So I shared that with the people on the Hotel Security Working Group. David picked up some more information and sent it out to the group. Mark Santa from Hyatt picked up some more information and sent it out to the group. And suddenly everybody was working together to share this information. And this is the best way that we can work together to share this information as a group. Because when we started this organization, you know, we talked about that blue Toyota that pulls up in front of the Intercon Hotel, and they're taking photos, and then they pull up in front of the Marriott Hotel, and then they pull up in front of the Hyatt Hotel. We need to share that information. And that's what we're doing now. Well, let me take you through what happened in Chicago. As I told you, these hotels are right across the street from each other. Ritz-Carlton is actually one of our brands. People say, well, why were you staying at the Ritz-Carlton if you work for Marriott? It's one of our brands, and it's a pretty nice brand, too. So I probably chose the Ritz-Carlton over the Marriott. And there we were staying at the Ritz-Carlton, as I told you, when this happened. But we had the hotel at threat condition red, and we had a lot of security going on at the time. We had, and this is, I put together just a little snapshot of what we do under threat condition red. Security officer at the front entrance at all times, security patrols at the perimeter, photo taking is detected, metal detector screening of everybody going in the hotel. We check all luggage going into the hotel. We inspect all vehicles. Well, as I mentioned before, the JW Marriott Hotel was attacked in 2003. And at that time, it was a 1986 Toyota Kijang, which was like an SUV in Indonesia, came down the street, made a left-hand turn into the driveway of the hotel. We had 3 security officers inspecting vehicles, because under threat condition red, we inspect all vehicles. And they were standing there, stopped the vehicle to inspect it, and at that time he blew it up. 12 people died. 1 was a hotel guest. All the rest were taxi drivers and security officers. So after that happened, you can see the type of security we put in. Now you can't even get close. See, it used to be you could drive all the way up to the front entrance there, but now that's all blocked off. And again, metal detector luggage inspection is all done well away from the lobby of the hotel. And you can see the type of security we had there. Police officer armed up there with an automatic weapon. You know, the metal detectors inspecting all the luggage. This is the vehicle inspection point. This is the blast wall here. CCTV up in the corner. You can see there's a drop-down barrier there in front of the vehicle before they get inspected. Police officer over here armed up. And that's, every vehicle goes through that. So that's the type of security that we put in after 2003. A lot of security. So what happened here in Jakarta is on July 10th, the reservation was made in the name of Nuri Hasdi. The person said he was going to stay 2 nights, he would pay cash. And on the 15th, here he is coming to the hotel. His name was actually Donnie Pramana. He was using an alias of Nuri Hasdi, but his name was Donnie Pramana. He was 18 years old. He had graduated from high school 2 months before this. And here he is showing up in the taxi cab, going through the vehicle inspection point. Here he is again. You can see the walk-through metal detector here. Here's Donnie back here coming through and getting inspected. He went through the metal detector, he was inspected, he was cleared. His baggage was set up on the table, they inspected his baggage, it was cleared. And then he moved to the front desk. You can see there he is checking in. He's got a baseball cap pulled low over his forehead, and there's 2 registrations desks across the street from each other. He kind of held back a little bit and waited for the one where the CCTV wouldn't have been on his face. Because as you can see here, the CCTV is right on this guy's face. Donnie is across the hall here, and we don't have the CCTV on his face. So he checks in, and he's given room 1808. And he goes up to his room, and there he was for the next 2 days. We know that there was a second key made for the room because we interrogated the locks, and we could see that a second key had been made. So there were 2 keys going into the room in that period of 2 days. This is the registration card. You can see he paid $140 a night US. He paid cash. He put a $330 down for the room. So that would have paid for the 2-night stay plus $50 for incidentals, which is pretty normal. People said, well, he paid cash. Isn't that unusual? As a matter of fact, the FBI came to me and they said, we want a list of everybody who paid cash at that hotel for the last year. Well, in Indonesia, it's very common to pay cash. As a matter of fact, if he would have checked into the hotel and presented a credit card, that would have been unusual. About 20% of all our customers there pay cash, and that's what he did. So again, nothing unusual there. The amount of money he put out, $330, again, nothing unusual there. You know, there were some news reports afterwards that said he put down $1,000 deposit. That wasn't true at all. So here he is, the morning of the 17th. He comes down off the lift, and he starts moving across the lobby. Now, when we had a security officer posted at the bottom of the lift, and when the security officer saw him, he was wearing the backpack to the front, baseball cap on, and he's moving across the lobby. So the security officer thought that was a bit unusual, and he's watching him. Now, if he would have turned right, he would have gone into the Solander restaurant and had breakfast. That would have been not unusual. But he didn't do that. If he would have gone left to check out at the registration desk, that would have been not unusual. But he didn't do that. Instead, he kept moving across the lobby. When he got to this point, there's an area called the Lobby Lounge. And there was a meeting going on in the Lobby Lounge. It's a group called Castle Asia, run by an American by the name of Jim Castle. There were about 12 people in the room at the time. They met every Friday morning at 7:30 a.m. in that room for a meeting. And they talked about, it was a group of investors, and they talked about economic conditions in Indonesia. And that's what they were doing that morning. So they showed up at 7:30. There was a table there where they could get some breakfast, and then they would sit around the room or sit around the table and talk about economic conditions. When Donnie got to this point, to the entrance of the room, the security officer who was standing there at the bottom of the lift motioned to the security supervisor who was standing at the entry to the lobby lounge. Something's wrong with this kid, what's going on? So the security supervisor stepped out and stopped the boy and said, "Where are you going?" And the boy said, "I've got a package to deliver to my boss, he's in that room." And the security supervisor said, "What's his name?" And when he said that, there was a banquet captain that interrupted them. And he said to the security supervisor, "Who's this boy?" And as the security supervisor turned his attention away from the boy, he moved into the room. And when he moved into the room, he detonated his device. And that's the first explosion I heard. This is a diagram of the table. And you can see where the bomber was standing. And all these people were seated around the table when the bomb went off. 6 people died. And the others were injured. So about an hour later, we got a call that one of our security officers, who was going through the hotel evacuating it, had found a device. And I went up there and I could see where he came off the fire stairwell, and the first door there, I could see an X on the door where he had inspected it, cleared the room. Next door, another X on the door. He had inspected it and cleared it. The third door, there was just a slash. He made part of the X, opened the door, and then this is what he saw. And he saw a flashing red light from this device going on. So he backed off, notified the police. They sent their EOD people up there, explosive ordnance disposal people, that went up and got the bomb. This was another bomb that was set to go off. Now, I was over there for a briefing about a month afterwards, and the EOD people in the briefing were saying this bomb was set, it was on a 12-minute timer, and what was supposed to happen is this bomb was supposed to go off after Donnie got into the lobby, and Donnie was supposed to wait. When this bomb went off, all the people would evacuate into the lobby, and then Donnie would detonate his device. But I told him it's not true. Because when Donnie got off the elevator, he moved directly across the room. He didn't wait for anything. So my own speculation on this device is it was set to go off a little bit like what happened in Mumbai. It was set to go off about the time all the emergency responders would have been arriving at the hotel. And again, just to cause chaos and confusion. There's another, it was actually in one of these Tupperware containers, which again is a hallmark of Jamaat Islamiyah. And there it is at police headquarters just before they dismantled it. And that's what it was encased in, this case. You can see it was filled with nuts and bolts. And the nuts and bolts provide the shrapnel. As a matter of fact, when I went to the hospital, I saw Jim Castle. And he showed me, he had a little plastic vial container, and he showed me one of the nuts that had been removed from his leg. And one of the other victims showed me a bolt that had been taken out of his arm. And that's what they were using for shrapnel. So across at the Ritz-Carlton, same type of things going on. All the security's up. You can see walk-through metal detector, luggage inspections going on, vehicle inspections. You can see the size of the drop-down barriers. And here we go. So we've got another bomber coming across the lobby here. He got off the lift, and when he did, there was a bellman standing there. And the bellman said that he noticed something a little bit unusual about this guy. The lift came up from the bottom, from the lower lobby. It didn't come down from a guest floor, it came up from the bottom. And the bellman remembered that and told us later. So here he is moving across the lobby. And he gets up to the restaurant, and at that time he's greeted by the hostess. And she says, would you like to sit down? He says, yes. She says, what's your room number? He said, 2701. And she said, well, we only have 26 floors. That's not a good room number. So that's pretty suspicious, right? Well, I stay in hotel rooms as much as anybody probably, and half the time I can't remember my room number. Has that ever happened to you when you're traveling? You have to go back down to the front desk and say, can you tell me what my room number is? So this isn't really that suspicious that he wouldn't remember his room number. So she said, what's your name? I'll look it up in the computer. And he said, oh, don't worry about it. I'm meeting a friend for breakfast. We'll pay cash. So she said, fine. Took him to a table, asked him if he wanted a cup of coffee. He said he did. She moved off to get the coffee. A couple of minutes later, this bomb goes off. Now, the interesting thing about this bomb is, remember, the bomb had gone off at the Marriott about 3 minutes earlier. When that went off at the Marriott, all the people in the restaurant moved to the window to see what was going on, because the hotels are across the street from each other. And when they did that, it probably saved their lives. There was a Dutch couple who died, but there probably would have been many, many other people that were severely injured or died if they hadn't moved over to the windows to see what had happened at the Marriott. This is the diagram here. Now this is interesting to see, because what happened here is he was seated over here, and then he got up and moved over to this area, and that's where he detonated the device. He didn't move with the people to the other side of the restaurant to the window. And think about that for a minute. I'll talk about it going past. And this is what it looked like. This is actually a couple of days later, but that's the kind of devastation and the carnage that I was seeing when I went down there that morning. Well, we thought about this, and we started thinking about this bellman who had talked about the fact that this guy had come up from the lower lobby. So we talked to the security people there, and we said, review the tapes, because we want to see how he got in. There were 3 ways he could have come in. One was through the loading dock. One was through a tunnel that connects the 2 hotels. And the third way is through the employee entrance. So we said, review the videotape and let's see what we can find. At about that time, we had a crisis meeting in the hotel. And we sat around the table, and the human resources director handed us a resignation letter. And she said there was a florist by the name of Ibrahim, and we have a resignation letter from him. And she read us the letter. It was written in Bahasa. But she said that the letter said that he's resigning effective today. He won't be back to the hotel. He owes some people some money, so please pay them out of his last check. So we thought we had somebody missing. We thought we needed to check the hospitals and see if we can find out what's happened to the florist. We've got a missing person here. But as our security officers reviewed the tape, this is what they found. Here's our florist, Ibrahim. He's coming in through the employee entrance, pushing a cart, and you can see he's got some boxes there and some plants on top of the cart. He's a florist. He's been working for a company called Cynthia Florist, and he's been working there for 4 years. And he works both hotels, both the Marriott and the Ritz-Carlton. So he has access to both hotels, and as I say, he's been there for about 4 years. He started working there in 2005, right after the Ritz-Carlton Hotel opened. And if you look closely, you can see there's somebody with him. You see the blue sleeve here? And there he is. That's who came in with him. That's our bomber. The florist, Ibrahim, brought him in. And that's what they did, is they came in through the employee entrance. So I told him, go back with the tapes. They've done it before. He's been in there before. This isn't his first time coming into the hotel. They would have done some probing before that. And so they started reviewing tape again, and this is what they found. 9 days before, here comes Ibrahim with his friend. And they came in through the employee entrance, and I'm sure Ibrahim introduced him to the security officers and said, here's my friend, he'll be working with me for a while. I wanted to introduce him to you and let you know. And Ibrahim had a very good reputation in the hotel. Everybody liked him. Nobody knew that he was a member of Jamaat Islamiyah and had been for 5 years. And he brought the bomber in with him. And there they are again. Again, 9 days before, and look where they are. Does that look familiar? Have you seen that slide before? There they are going into the restaurant. And I'm sure what happened here is Ibrahim took the bomber in, they sat down, and Ibrahim showed him the exact place he wanted him to stand when he detonated the device. Remember I told you he didn't move with the people to the window? He stood there where Ibrahim told him to stand and detonated his device, because that's what was in his mind at the time. And there they are. There's Donnie Pramana on the left there, this 18-year-old boy. Does he look like a suicide bomber? Well, after this happened, I put together some notes because I wanted to share this with people, and because there were some learnings here. And these are the learnings I picked up on. Have a crisis team and a crisis plan. Rehearse it. Have a system for risk analysis so that you understand what the threat is. First responders should be readily identifiable. In most of our hotels, our first responders are dressed in suits. Security officers are dressed in suits. Little name tag, we don't know who they are. And we have to change that. First responders should be trained in triage. You know, so many times we talk about how we're going to prevent this. We need to start thinking about what happens if it happens. What are we going to do? How do we respond? Evacuation needs to be considered carefully. Is it the best thing to do to evacuate a hotel when you get a bomb threat? Because you might be evacuating people right into an unsafe area where another device has been placed. So that's something to think about all the time. Window film saves lives. 80% of the injuries caused by a blast are caused by flying glass. So you can see, if you would have looked closely in those slides I showed you in Jakarta, we had window film. And when I was there, I could see the windows had just collapsed, and the film had held the windows together. Initial crisis meetings should be brief and confined to the immediate needs. We had our first crisis meeting, and people wanted to talk about what we're going to do for employee counseling and what we're going to do in 2 weeks from now. We didn't have time to deal with that. We needed to deal with the immediate issues right now. Let's talk, and we didn't have an hour to talk on the phone with these people back in Washington, with the lawyers and risk management and HR and all these people. We needed to deal with what was going on right then, currently. Have a plan to access the guest list, and that's written into our plan. Our hotels in high-risk environments, they're required to send off on a daily basis the guest list, so that if something happens at one of our hotels, we can reach out and pull it. And that, when this happened, the regional security officer was there from the U.S. Embassy, and he said, have you got a list of the U.S. citizens staying in the hotel? I said, sure. I called my project director in Washington. I said, send me the list. He sent it to me on my BlackBerry. I forwarded it on to the RSO. There was somebody from the French ministry there, too, who wanted a list of any French people staying, so we just sent them the list. Dispatch representative to local hospitals. We need to find out where the people are. It's a big issue. When this happened in 2003, it was in the middle of the day. People were off on business appointments, and some of them just went to the airport and left. So we've got to try to track down where they are so we can figure out who needs help. Consider how to deal with the media. It's interesting listening to Bernard talk earlier, because they will fill the space if you don't talk to them. And originally, you know, there were some people in our company saying, don't talk to the media. This is not something we want to talk to the media about. And so what they were doing is there was so much rumors and speculation going on, that's what the media were printing. And then the head of PR for Marriott made the decision, no, let's talk to them. So I started doing interviews. I did interviews with CNN and Fox News and Al Jazeera and ABC out of Australia, and interview after interview after interview. I probably did 15 interviews in the next couple of days. But we wanted to get the word out because there were some positive things going on. You know, I talked to them about all the security we had up before this happened. You know, I didn't want them to think that we weren't doing anything because we were doing a lot. And they asked me, you know, how do you feel now? You know, did you guys make mistakes here? And I said, we'll review it. And if we made mistakes, we'll correct those. But give us some time to review everything that happened first. But we had to get the word out to the news media. Dealing with authorities became an issue. You need to have a relationship beforehand with the authorities because the Indonesians, in this case, wanted to go it alone. Before, they had used the Australians or the U.S. to help them in their bomb blast investigations. Not this time. They didn't want anybody around. The FBI showed up there. I told the Indonesian authorities that the 3 FBI agents worked for me out of my office, that they were Marriott corporate security people, so we could take them through the tape and they could see what had happened. Always do an after-action review. Sit down with people, with your committee afterwards, and talk about what did we do right, what can we do differently. So after this happened, you can see the type of security now we're putting into hotels. I identified 35 hotels throughout the world in high-risk environments, and again, we're just upping the physical security because, as I said, this is dynamic. It's changing all the time, so we need to try to stay ahead of it. So we're putting in much more security into our hotels. So everybody says, well, maybe we shouldn't put our people in 5-star hotels then. Maybe we should put them in guest houses or 3-star hotels. And this was what they were all saying until last October 28th, when there was an attack on a guest house in Kabul where they killed 5 UN workers. And the reason they shouldn't put people in guest houses or 3-star hotels is because they don't have a lot of the things that a 5-star hotel offers. You know, when we look at sprinkler systems and electronic door locks, in-room safes, all those kind of things provide security. And you have to analyze the risk. Is the risk worse from a terrorist attack, or is the risk worse from a hotel fire, or an assault, or a rape, or a robbery? And when we look at it statistically, the number of people who have died in terrorist attacks is very, very small. But the number of people who have been assaulted in the hotels because the hotel didn't have adequate security, or who have died in a hotel fire because the hotel didn't have sprinkler systems or fire systems, is much greater. The other thing, food sanitation standards. And what you've got is you've got an environment where people are going outside to look for lunch or to look for dinner and exposing themselves to what could be a hostile environment. So again, you've got to have, when you start shifting people outside of 5-star hotels, this is the risk you take. So I want to leave you with this last thought. There's always too much security until the day when there wasn't enough. And that's what we deal with all the time.